I used to believe that a mother's heart could weather anything. Storms, betrayals, even the silent ache of watching her children grow into strangers. But nothing prepared me for the moment I learned the truth about my son. The truth that would tear apart everything I thought I knew about him, about family, about loyalty. It began on a cold Thursday morning, one of those mornings where the sun rises reluctantly, as if tired of shining on a world that feels too heavy. I was sitting at the hospital, in that stiff vinyl chair next to my daughter-in-law's bed. Emma lay there, breath shallow, skin pale, her life slipping away thread by thread while machines beeped around her like hollow reminders that she wasn't gone. Yet, she was only 28. My son's wife, the woman who had held our family together with kindness stitched into every word she spoke. The woman who would smile at me even on days she was drowning in pain. And now she was dying, and the world felt so unbearably small. I reached for her cold hand, brushing my thumb across her knuckles. "He'll be here soon," I whispered, more to fill the emptiness than from true belief. "Daniel loves you. He wouldn't leave you alone like this." But the truth was a weight already forming in my chest. Daniel had been distant, drifting, wrapped in excuses that unraveled the more I pulled at them. "Work," he'd said. "Traffic. Meetings. You know how things get, Mom." But I knew my son. And I knew when he was lying. Still, I held on to hope like a lifeline. Because what mother wants to believe her son could abandon his dying wife? The nurse walked in quietly, checking Emma's vitals. She gave me a sad smile, the kind worn by people who've delivered too many condolences. "Any updates from Daniel?" she asked softly. "No," I said, clearing the lump in my throat. "But he'll come." She nodded politely, but her eyes told me she didn't believe it. And something inside me snapped. Not anger, not yet, but something like a crack in the foundation, the beginning of an earthquake. When she left, I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Daniel's contact. I called twice, no answer. The silence on the other end of the line was louder than any ringtone. I stood pacing the small room. The window overlooked the parking lot, rows of cars that all seemed too bright for such a dark day. My reflection looked older than I remembered, more tired, more broken. A sound escaped Emma's throat, soft but pained. I hurried back to her side. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a moment she looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. Clear. Present. "Where is he?" she whispered. My heart shattered. "He's coming, sweetheart." "He." "Don't lie," she breathed. Tears filled my eyes. I squeezed her hand, feeling the fragility of her bones beneath my touch. "I'm here. I won't leave you." She blinked slowly, like it took every ounce of strength she had. "Thank you," she murmured, barely audible. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, but lies tasted bitter on my tongue. So I stayed silent, letting my presence say what words could not. Then, at 11:47 a.m., my sister sent me a message that would change everything. "You need to see this right now." Attached was a photo, a blurry one taken from across a parking lot. My son's car. And Daniel leaning against the driver's door laughing like the world was carefree. And beside him stood two girls, young, dressed in a way that left nothing to the imagination. One of them had her hand on his chest. The other was holding his keys. The caption underneath felt like a knife. "He's been seen with them all week." I didn't want to believe it either. For a moment my body forgot how to breathe. The hospital room spun. The air thickened. The universe tilted. My son, my boy, was out driving around with girls while his wife lay dying. The betrayal was so deep it felt physical. Like someone had reached inside my chest and twisted something vital. My hands trembled. Rage and grief collided inside me, dangerous and explosive. I stepped out into the hallway, the picture still glowing on my screen, my fingers numb around the phone. Daniel's voicemail picked up again when I called. Hearing him casually say, "Hey, it's Daniel," made bile rise in my throat. A doctor walked past me and I held up a hand. "Please keep an eye on her for a few minutes," I said. "I need some air." Outside, the cold wind slapped my face. I sucked in a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. A part of me wanted to scream, but the scream got stuck behind the words I couldn't form. I'd raised him better, taught him better, loved him better. So why? Why would he do this? I dialed him one more time. This time he answered. His voice was too cheerful, too casual. Hey Mom. I was just about to call you. Don't. I cut him off sharply. Where are you? There was a pause, the slightest hesitation. Just out running errands. Why? I swallowed the fury burning at the back of my throat. Daniel, I said quietly, dangerously. I saw the picture. Silence. Cold. Heavy. Guilt-ridden silence. Then he stammered. Mom. It's not what it looks like. Oh really? My voice cracked like thunder. Because it looks like your wife is dying and you're out with girls who have no idea what loyalty even means. Another silence. This one worse. Mom. It's complicated. No, Daniel. It's cruel. My breath came out in ragged bursts. I wanted to hold myself together, but the pieces were falling too fast. Get here, I ordered. Now. Before it's too late. And then, for the first time in his life, my son hung up on me. That was the moment something hardened inside me. Something cold and sharp. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Anger rising like a tide I could no longer contain. I walked back into the hospital, every step heavier than the last. Emma was still, her breaths weaker, the room dimmer. Her life slipping away, while the man she married ran from his responsibilities like a coward. I sat down again, holding her hand in both of mine, whispering prayers I wasn't sure would reach heaven. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, I lost track. Then my phone buzzed with another message. Another photo. Another knife. Daniel getting into his car. The girl in the passenger seat. The other one climbing into the back. And they were laughing again. I closed my eyes, tears finally spilling over. My son wasn't coming. Not for his wife. Not for me. Not for anyone but himself. And that was the moment, the exact moment when the decision formed inside my mind. A decision that would later destroy him. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking into the hallway again. All I remember is the sharp echo of my shoes on the tiles, moving without direction, fueled by a storm I'd never felt before. A mother's disappointment is painful, but a mother's betrayal, that is catastrophic. I leaned against the cold wall, pressing the phone to my chest as if it could steady my heartbeat. It didn't. Nothing could. Across from me, a janitor mopped the floor slowly, humming under his breath, unaware that my entire world was collapsing. I watched the mop glide back and forth, the rhythm almost hypnotic. Life goes on even when it shouldn't. My phone buzzed again, this time it was the hospital. I rushed back into the room, fearing the worst, but Emma hadn't taken her last breath yet. She was barely conscious, barely holding on, but still here. Still fighting. Fighting harder than my own son. I sat beside her again, guilt dripping into my heart. She deserved better than this. She deserved a husband who would sit at her bedside, wipe her tears, hold her hand until the end. Instead, she got a mother-in-law holding a phone full of proof that her marriage had been a lie. Her fingers twitched weakly in my hand. Is he coming? She whispered, eyes barely open. I swallowed the truth. If I told her what Daniel was really doing, I feared it would crush whatever strength she had left. But lying felt like poisoning a dying woman's last moments. So I chose a middle ground. I called him, I said gently. He knows you need him. Her eyes shimmered with a kind of acceptance that felt like a knife slipping between my ribs. She understood. She knew. She wasn't naive. She wasn't blind to the truth. She simply chose grace in a situation where anyone else would choose resentment. That was the thing about Emma, kindness was her default setting. I leaned closer. You deserved better, I whispered, my voice breaking. She blinked slowly, her lips trembling. We all make choices. I hated that she was still protecting him. Even now. Even as her life faded like a candle burning too fast. But maybe that was why my anger deepened, because she was everything good, and he was everything she didn't deserve. The door opened and my sister stepped inside, her expression tight with concern. She nodded toward the hallway, gesturing for me to step out. Reluctantly, I released Emma's hand and followed her outside. What happened? I asked. She exhaled shakily. I just got another text from a friend. And it's worse than we thought. My stomach dropped. Worse how? My sister hesitated, biting her lip. He's not just driving around with them. He's been taking them out at night. Clubs. Bars. Expensive dinners. She didn't finish, but I knew. Like he was single. Like he was free. Like his wife wasn't clinging to life in a hospital bed. "Show me," I demanded. She handed me her phone. There he was again, Daniel, standing outside a club, arms around both girls, smiling like nothing in the world mattered except his own pleasure. The timestamp was from last night. My blood boiled. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped the phone. How could he? I whispered. How could he do this to her? My sister touched my shoulder gently. He's lost, Mary. People do terrible things when they're lost. No, I snapped. Being lost doesn't excuse cruelty. Tears blurred the images on the screen. I felt them slide hot and angry down my cheeks. Everything in me screamed to confront him, to drag him back here, to force him to face the consequences of his choices. But another part of me, quieter, colder, had already begun planning something else. Something far more powerful than confrontation. Because sometimes you can't scream someone into guilt. Sometimes you have to let the truth break them. A movement down the hall caught my attention. A nurse hurried past with a chart, her expression grave. She didn't stop long enough to explain, but something about her urgency pulled me like gravity. I rushed back into Emma's room. Her breathing was shallower. Her skin paler. Her heartbeat slower. The doctor entered moments later, checking her vitals with swift, practiced motions. His jaw tightened slightly. A small, subtle gesture only someone watching closely would notice. I stepped forward. How much time does she have? He turned to me, his eyes soft, grief etched in the lines around them. Hours, he said quietly. Maybe. The world fell silent. Everything slowed. Even my heartbeat seemed to pause. Hours. Maybe. I nodded numbly, thanking him even though my mind wasn't fully present. When he left, I returned to Emma's bedside, taking her hand again. I'm here, I whispered. I won't leave. She managed the faintest smile. You're a good mother. Those words were like a punch. 'Cause I wasn't. Not anymore. Not when I'd raised a man who could abandon his dying wife. Emma. My voice cracked. If he doesn't come. She squeezed my hand weakly, stopping me. No anger, she murmured. Not now. But forgiveness wasn't mine to give. Not this time. Not for this. I brushed her hair back gently, fighting to steady my voice. You rest. I'll take care of everything. As she closed her eyes, a strange calm settled over me. Not peace, nothing close to peace. But purpose. I stood, walking to the window. Outside, the parking lot glistened with the remnants of a brief rain. The world washed clean while inside the room. Life was fading. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. I stared at the name on the screen, my jaw tightening. He was calling me this time. I answered but said nothing. Mom, he said uncertainly. Mom, listen. I'm on the way. The lie was obvious. I could hear music in the background. Laughter. The thump of bass. He wasn't in a car. He wasn't on the road. He wasn't even trying. You need to come now, I said coldly. This is your last chance. Mom, stop being dramatic. She's fine, she always. She has hours, Daniel. I shouted, my voice cracking with pain. Hours. Do you understand that? Silence on his end again. But not a heavy, guilty silence. An annoyed one. He sighed. Look, I'll be there later, okay? I just need to finish something. I felt everything inside me go still. Finish what? I demanded. In the background, I heard a girl's voice giggle. Come on, Daniel. That was it. The moment the mother in me died, and something else rose in her place. Something resolute. Something righteous. Something dangerous. When I spoke again, my voice was steady. Frozen. Steel. Daniel, I said. Don't come later. Don't come at all. What? Mom. You've made your choice. What does that mean? You'll find out. And then I hung up on him. For the first time in his life. I put the phone down slowly, releasing a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. Emma's breathing grew softer behind me, and I knew everything was about to change. I stood beside the window a long moment, feeling the cold glass against my fingertips as I stared outside. Cars came and went, people hurried in and out of the hospital, carrying their own burdens, unaware of the storm swelling inside me. The world was still spinning, indifferent to Emma's suffering, indifferent to my son's selfish betrayal. But I wasn't indifferent anymore. Something inside me had shifted. An awakening, a resolve, a fire that burned hotter each minute I replayed his voice in my head. Come on, Daniel. That girl's giggle. The music. His irritation. His complete lack of concern that his wife was dying. He didn't deserve forgiveness. He didn't deserve grace. He deserved to face the truth of what he had done, and the consequences that would come from it. I turned back to Emma, her breaths becoming softer, almost like sighs slipping through her lips. I dragged the chair closer again, my hands trembling as I reached for hers. Her skin felt cooler than before, her fingers limp. Fear clawed at me. Fear that she might slip away in the next minute, the next breath, the next blink. And fear that Daniel wouldn't see her again. Not that he seemed to care. Her eyelids fluttered weakly when I brushed a strand of hair from her face. She opened her eyes halfway, her gaze unfocused at first, then settling on me slowly. You came back, she whispered. I never left, I said softly. I'm here. I'm staying with you. She tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. He called. My heart twisted. Yes. She swallowed painfully, her throat working hard. Is he coming? I hesitated, not because I didn't know what to say, but because the truth felt too cruel, too heavy to lay on her fragile chest. But Emma deserved truth. Truth had always been her anchor. I leaned in closer and spoke gently. I don't think he'll make it here in time. A flicker of sadness crossed her face. Not anger, not bitterness, just a quiet acceptance, like she'd been expecting this all along. She closed her eyes again, a tear slipping down the corner of her face. I'm sorry, I whispered, wiping it gently. You deserved a better ending than this. She didn't respond. Maybe she didn't have the strength. Maybe she didn't want to speak the pain out loud. But her hand squeezed mine faintly, a gesture more comforting than any words. The door opened quietly and a nurse stepped inside, checking Emma's vitals. Her expression tightened when she saw the readings, and she glanced at me with a kind of empathetic warning. It's progressing faster, she said softly. If you need to call anyone, now would be the time. Her words hit me like a blow. Call anyone. Anyone but the one person who should have been here. I nodded. Thank you. The nurse laid a gentle hand on my shoulder before walking out. When the door closed, the room felt smaller, heavier. The machines beeped irregularly, each sound like a countdown. I pulled my phone out again, staring at Daniel's name on the screen. For a fleeting moment, I wrestled with myself. Should I call him again? Plead with him? Give him one more chance? But the memory of his laughter with those girls, his irritation when I told him Emma was dying, replayed in my mind like poison. And the coldness that had settled inside me grew stronger. Instead of calling him, I pressed the power button and shut the phone off completely. If he wanted to come, if he suddenly found a conscience, he would have to show up without me begging. I wasn't going to be the bridge anymore. I wasn't going to be the one holding his hand as he destroyed every good thing he ever had. I took a deep breath, returning fully to Emma. Her breathing was slowing, becoming more uneven. There was a distant look on her face, like she was halfway between here and somewhere far more peaceful. I leaned in close. I'm right here, I whispered. You're not alone. Her lips parted slightly. I leaned closer. I loved him, she breathed. My throat tightened. I know. I always hoped he'd grow up, become the man he was supposed to be. A tear slid down her cheek, followed by another, and my heart shattered into pieces. I know, sweetheart, I whispered, brushing them away. You loved him with everything you had. She opened her eyes again, just barely. Don't hate him. Promise me. I hesitated. I wanted to make that promise. I wanted to give her anything she asked for. But I couldn't lie to a dying woman. I won't hate him, I finally said. But I won't protect him anymore. She blinked slowly, as if she understood. Or maybe she was too tired to process anything. Her hand loosened in mine. The doctor stepped in again, checking her pulse. His expression softened as he looked at me. We're very close, he said gently. My breath caught in my throat. She was slipping away. I held her hand tighter, tears streaming silently down my face. She didn't squeeze back this time. Her breaths were shallow, her chest rising only slightly. The doctor stood quietly in the corner, giving her space to go on her terms. As her life faded, I leaned close, my voice trembling. "You mattered," I whispered. "You changed all of us. You changed me." A faint exhale left her lips. Then another. Then a final one. Long, slow, soft. The world froze. The room became unbearably silent. Emma was gone. I bowed my head, my forehead resting on her hand as I sobbed quietly, letting my grief pour out. She didn't deserve this ending. Not like this. Not alone with a mother-in-law, while her husband chased pleasure with strangers. When my tears finally subsided, I stood slowly, brushing her hair back one last time. I kissed her forehead gently. "I'll make sure the world knows who you were," I whispered. "And who he chose to be." I turned away from the bed. And as I stepped out into the hallway, my phone still off, my son still oblivious, I knew. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The beginning of a truth he would never escape. The hallway outside Emma's room felt colder than before, as if her absence had sucked warmth out of the air. Nurses moved quietly around me, their expressions soft with understanding. They'd seen this scene play out countless times, but to me, the world had tilted on its axis. I stood still for a moment, my fingers trembling as I held the railing along the wall. The lights above flickered slightly, humming with the sterile consistency of hospital life, but inside me there was nothing consistent anymore, just a storm. My sister appeared down the hall the moment she saw my face. Her steps quickened, her eyes widening with grief and dread. "She's gone," I whispered before she even reached me. She nodded, pulling me into a long, tight embrace. I didn't realize how badly I needed it until my knees almost buckled. She held me as I cried into her shoulder, sobbing in a way I hadn't since I was a child. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. "She was such a gentle soul. She deserved so much more," I choked out. She deserved a husband who loved her enough to hold her hand as she left this world. But he wasn't here. He didn't even try. My sister didn't argue, didn't offer excuses for Daniel. Even she knew there were none left to give. When I pulled away, wiping my eyes, my voice was quieter but harder. "He doesn't know yet. You haven't told him?" I turned my phone off, I said. "He doesn't deserve to hear it from me. Not yet." Her eyebrows pulled together. "What do you mean?" "He has to know, Mary." "Oh, he will," I said, looking through the hospital's glass window into the night. "But not over a phone call. Let him live with the consequences of choosing pleasure over loyalty first. Let him sit in his comfort a little longer while the woman he abandoned is taken away." My sister exhaled slowly, unsure, but she didn't challenge me. She knew better. I wasn't being impulsive. I was being intentional. The doctor called me back to the room to discuss the next steps. Paperwork, decisions, arrangements. All the things no one wants to think about but someone has to do. I answered with a numbness that made me feel disconnected, like I was floating outside my body, watching myself respond. When I walked back into the room to gather Emma's belongings, something inside me broke all over again. Her pillow still held the shape of her head. The blanket was still warm from her body. Her scent lingered faintly in the air, soft, floral, gentle. I folded her sweater, her book, her hair ties, placing them in a small plastic bag like they were just ordinary objects. But they weren't. They were pieces of a life that had mattered deeply. I lifted her wedding ring from the bedside table. Daniel had given it to her with so many promises. Lifetime promises. Sacred promises. I held it for a long while, staring at the tiny gemstone glistening under the pale hospital light. Promises are easy to speak. Keeping them is where truth lives. I slipped the ring into my own pocket. He would not get it back. Not yet. As they wheeled her body out, covered by the white sheet, I followed behind, my hand pressed over my heart. My steps were silent, but inside me emotions raged like thunder. At the end of the hallway, a young nurse touched my shoulder softly. "We'll take good care of her, ma'am." I nodded, unable to speak. When they disappeared behind the double doors, something inside me hardened completely. I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. Immediately, it buzzed violently with missed calls and messages. All from Daniel. I stared at the screen, reading them one by one. "Mom, where are you? Is she okay? Mom, answer me. I'm coming later, don't make this dramatic. Did something happen? Mom?" None of them sounded remorseful. None of them sounded urgent. None of them sounded like the messages of a man fighting to reach his dying wife. My fingers moved before I even processed the decision. I typed back one simple message. "It's done." Within seconds he replied. "What do you mean it's done?" Mom stopped being cryptic. His impatience made my stomach twist with disgust. I typed again. "Come to the hospital. If you care." He sent a few more messages, annoyed, confused, complaining about traffic, complaining about how I always overreact. And I realized something with chilling clarity. He wasn't the man I thought I raised. Or maybe he was. Maybe I had just never seen the cracks this clearly until now. My sister stood beside me, reading over my shoulder. "Are you going to tell him?" "No," I whispered. "Not yet. Let him come. Let him walk into that room and feel the emptiness he created." She hesitated. "That might be too cruel." "Cruel?" I whispered sharply. "Emma died with tears on her face because he wasn't here. Nothing I do will ever be cruel enough to match what he did to her." She didn't argue this time. We waited in the family lounge, the clock ticking slowly. Nurses passed in and out, speaking softly to each other. The vending machine hummed quietly. The world moved on while I sat there gripping the plastic bag of Emma's belongings like it was the last piece of her life. Finally, after nearly an hour, Daniel burst through the entrance doors, hair disheveled, eyes glossy, not from crying but from alcohol. His shirt was wrinkled, and he smelled faintly of cheap perfume. He scanned the lobby, spotted me, and rushed over. "Mom, what happened? You're scaring me." I didn't stand. I didn't even acknowledge him with the softness he expected. I simply looked up at him, my expression cold, empty, unrecognizable even to myself. "You're late," I said. He blinked, confused. "Late for what?" My jaw tightened. "Late for everything that mattered." He frowned. "Mom, where's Emma? What's going on? Why wouldn't you answer your phone?" I stood slowly, holding the plastic bag against my chest. "You should go to her room," I said, "and see for yourself." His confusion grew into panic, but not the right kind, more like fear of consequences than fear of loss. "What do you mean?" he demanded. "Is she okay? Mom, tell me." I stepped past him, heading toward the hallway, my voice cold and steady. "She waited for you," I said, "until she couldn't anymore." He froze. "Mom, what does that mean?" I didn't answer. I didn't look at him. I simply kept walking, letting each step carry the truth closer to his chest like a tightening noose. He followed behind me, his breath quickening with every step, panic finally catching up to him. And when we turned the corner toward Emma's room, he stopped walking, stopped breathing, and the truth, sharp and merciless, hit him like a blow. But that was only the beginning. Daniel stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the door to Emma's room as if it were a cliff he couldn't bring himself to step over. His breath hitched. His chest rose and fell rapidly, panic finally slicing through the arrogance he had carried so easily. "Go on," I said quietly, my voice low, steady. "She's waiting." My words were deliberate. Cruel maybe. But truth often feels cruel when you've been hiding from it. He turned toward me with wide, terrified eyes. "Mom, just tell me she's okay." His voice cracked, the facade slipping. "Tell me I'm not too late." I didn't look away. "You're exactly as late as you chose to be." He swallowed, trembling, and for a second, just a second, I saw the little boy he once was. Lost, confused, desperate for reassurance. But then the flicker died, smothered by the choices he had made. I stepped aside. Slowly, as if gravity fought against him, he pushed the door open. The room was dim, quiet. Too quiet. Emma lay on the bed, her face peaceful, covered up to her chest with the white hospital sheet. The machines were off. The nurse had already removed the wires. There was no beeping, no movement, just stillness. Daniel stumbled forward, his breath catching in his throat. "Emma," he whispered, voice breaking. Baby." He moved closer, reaching for her hand. It was cold. His face crumpled instantly, devastation ramming into him like a freight train. "No," he choked. No. Emma, please." His knees buckled as he leaned over her, gripping her hand desperately, as if pressure could somehow bring warmth back to it, as if begging could undo choices. Watching him crumble didn't bring satisfaction. It didn't soothe me, didn't heal anything. But it did deliver truth. This was the man he had chosen to become. This was the reality he had earned. My sister stood behind me, silent, her hand pressed against her chest as emotion swelled in her eyes. She didn't step forward to comfort him, and neither did I. Not yet. Daniel pressed his forehead against Emma's hand, sobbing with a guttural sound that came from the deepest parts of regret. Please, please wake up, he cried. I'm here now. I'm here, Emma. I'm here. He wasn't really talking to her. He was talking to the guilt tearing him apart. He lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. His voice was hoarse, raw. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you force me to come earlier? My heart hardened again. I stepped into the room with slow, measured steps. Because she deserved someone who wanted to come, I said. Not someone dragged here by obligation. He flinched as if I had slapped him. You don't understand, he cried. I didn't think it was this serious. She always got better. Every time. You thought wrong, I said coldly. He shook his head violently, tears flying off his face. Mom, please don't do this, not right now. Now is exactly the time, I said. This is the moment consequences matter most. He stared at me, stunned, broken, helpless. I loved her. I didn't soften. Not even a little. Love isn't what you say, Daniel. I stepped closer, holding Emma's plastic belongings bag in my hands. It's what you do. And when she needed you most, you were with other women, laughing, drinking, pretending your responsibilities didn't exist. His face contorted with shame. I messed up. I know that. I know. He looked down at Emma, sobbing again. But I didn't think she'd go today. I thought I had time. Time is earned, I said. And you didn't earn it. His shoulders shook as he leaned over her again, his whole body trembling. This time his cries were quieter, exhausted, defeated, consumed by the weight of his own decisions. Minutes passed. Maybe 10. Maybe 30. I didn't keep track. Because what mattered was the truth finally seeping into him. Slow, painful, irreversible. Eventually, he lifted his head, red-eyed and shaking. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, looking at me like a child begging for forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. What do I do now? He whispered. I looked at him long and hard before answering. You face what you've done, I said. Fully. Honestly. Without excuses. He closed his eyes, tears streaming again. I held up the small plastic bag with Emma's belongings. Here, I said softly. He reached for it with trembling hands. Inside were her sweater, her book, her hair ties, and the ring he had placed on her finger years ago when he promised forever. The moment he saw the glint of the ring, he collapsed inside. He slid down onto the chair, clutching the bag to his chest like it was the last piece of her he had left. I don't deserve her things, he whispered through tears. You're right, I said. But you do deserve to carry the weight of them. He looked up at me, a broken man shattered by grief and regret. Mom, can you just sit with me? He asked weakly. And in that moment I saw him not as the man who abandoned his wife, but as the child I raised, the one who once needed me to hold his hand to chase away nightmares. But not even a mother can chase away the nightmares born from your own choices. Still I sat down. Not for him, but for Emma, for the love she carried even in the face of his betrayal. Daniel leaned against the bed, gripping Emma's hand again, his face buried in her sheets. I sat quietly beside him, staring at the wall, listening to the sound of a broken heart trying to piece itself back together. After a long stretch of silence, he spoke again, his voice fragile, thin. Mom, do people ever come back from something like this? I didn't know if he meant grief, guilt, or the destruction he had caused, so I answered honestly. Some people do, I said. Some people don't. He nodded slowly, his breath shaking. And then, his phone buzzed on the floor beside him. Bright screen. A girl's name flashing. We both stared at it. A symbol of everything he had been. A symbol of everything that destroyed him. He reached out with trembling fingers. And what he did next would define what kind of man he was becoming now. I swallowed hard as I stepped into the hospital's quiet hallway. The echo of my footsteps felt too loud, almost intruding on the fragile space where life and death had collapsed into each other. A nurse walked past me with a clipboard and a tired smile, but even that small kindness felt heavy. I wasn't sure if I deserved it, not after the days I'd spent raging, accusing, doubting my own son, and still being unable to grasp why he'd chosen distraction over devotion. Nora's room was dim, only a single lamp casting a soft cone of yellow light over her sleeping form. Machines hummed beside her, steady but slow, and the rhythmic beep sounded like someone tapping on a door you didn't want to open. She looked small, too small for someone who had carried so much love inside her. When she breathed, her shoulders barely rose, as if even that simple movement cost her too much. I pulled the chair closer to her bed and sat down quietly. For a moment I just watched her, letting the silence settle around us. It was the kind of silence that made everything sharp. Every memory, every regret, every choice I wished I could undo for her. I wanted to take her pain, to give her rest, to rewind time to when she was laughing in my kitchen, teaching me how to make her mother's famous lemon pie. The last time she made it, she had joked that life was too short not to eat dessert first. Now the thought twisted something inside my chest. "Nora," I whispered, only because speaking any louder felt like it might shatter her. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Her fingers twitched slightly, as if trying to find something. I reached out and held her hand, and for a moment she squeezed back. My breath caught. I didn't know if it meant she heard me, or if it was the involuntary movement of someone drifting far from the world, but I held onto it like it was a message from her soul. The door creaked softly behind me. I turned expecting a nurse, but instead it was Ben. His eyes were red again, but not from anger this time. There was a strange combination of determination and grief in them, heavy and unsettling. He walked toward the bed without looking at me and took Nora's other hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know I've messed up. I know I made you think the worst. But I promise, none of this was what you think." I didn't respond. I couldn't trust myself to. My heart was too loud, too sensitive. Every part of me wanted to demand answers, to shake the truth out of him. But the sight of him standing there, trembling, crushed any anger I had left. "I wasn't driving around with girls for fun," he said after a long moment, his voice cracking. I wasn't cheating or partying or living like nothing was happening." His throat tightened, but he kept going. "I was trying to save her." The words hung between us, unfamiliar and strange, as if they didn't belong in the world we were living in. Trying to save her? What did that mean? My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" I finally asked, my voice barely more than a breath. He exhaled shakily. "I didn't want to say anything until I knew if it would work. I didn't want to give you or myself false hope. Those girls you think I was with, they weren't girls." He paused, rubbing his hands over his face. "They were specialists, researchers, people working on a trial treatment." I blinked, confused. "A treatment? For Nora?" He nodded. "They weren't from a hospital. They're part of an independent medical program, experimental, but with real results in cases like hers. I found them online after weeks of searching. I reached out desperately, and when they responded, I drove to meet them. Those girls you saw in the pictures were two researchers, their sisters. They reviewed Nora's medical records. They wanted to help." My heart pounded painfully against my ribs. It almost sounded too far-fetched, too sudden, too hopeful. But Ben wasn't lying. Not in this moment. I could feel the truth in every tremble of his voice. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because I didn't know if I'd get them to agree. And I knew if I told you, you'd either stop me or worry yourself sick. I didn't want to bring you hope that might break you if it wasn't real." He leaned over Nora, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead with shaking fingers. "They're reviewing her case right now, Mom. They said they might have something, a treatment that could slow the damage or even reverse some of it. But," he hesitated, swallowing hard, "it's risky. And it's expensive." There it was. The truth. The heavy, aching truth behind all the anger and suspicion. He wasn't running from reality. He was racing toward it. Desperate. Determined. Clinging to the smallest chance of saving the woman he loved. My hands trembled as I stood up. I moved closer because suddenly the space between us felt unnecessary, even cruel. "How much?" I asked. He didn't look at me. A lot. How much, Ben? He finally met my eyes and I saw fear. Not of money, not of failure, but of losing her despite everything. 200,000. My breath caught. It felt like someone had reached inside and twisted everything all at once. It was an impossible number. A mountain neither of us could climb. Price too high for hope. But then I looked at Nora, the woman who gave my son a reason to grow up, who filled our home with laughter again, who held our family together with her soft voice and stubborn heart, and something inside me broke. My voice trembled as I whispered, "We'll find it." Ben stared at me like he couldn't believe what he'd heard, like he expected me to walk away. But I didn't. I held his shoulder, steadying him the way I used to when he was little and scared of storms. "We'll find a way," I said again, stronger this time. "But you need to tell me everything. No more secrets." He nodded slowly, the hardness in his expression melting into something raw and vulnerable. Just as he opened his mouth to explain more, the monitors beside Nora suddenly beeped in an irregular rhythm, sharp and urgent. We both spun toward her as the numbers on the screen flickered. Her breathing hitched. Her hand slipped from mine. A nurse burst through the door, rushing to the bed. "Stay back," she said quickly. "We need to assess her right now." But I couldn't move. Neither could Ben. We stood frozen as the nurse called for help, her voice sharp and tense. Something was happening. Something neither of us was prepared for. And as they worked around Nora, Ben grabbed my arm, gripping it tightly, not out of fear alone, but out of the terror that the chance he'd fought so hard to find might disappear before he could explain everything. The room spun into motion so fast I couldn't process the chaos. Nurses rushed in from the hallway, pushing a crash cart, their voices overlapping in sharp, urgent tones. One of them pressed a button on the wall, calling for the attending physician. Another adjusted Nora's oxygen mask as her chest struggled to rise. Ben and I stood frozen against the wall, unable to breathe, unable to blink, unable to do anything but watch the woman we both loved slip through the cracks of the world. "Her vitals are dropping," one nurse called out. "We need to stabilize her now." My knees trembled, and I clutched the edge of the small table beside me to keep myself upright. I could feel Ben's panic radiating off him like heat. His hands were shaking uncontrollably, but his eyes were locked on Nora, wide and terrified. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "Mom, is she?" "Don't you dare finish that sentence," I whispered back, shaking my head. "She's fighting. She's still fighting." But even as I said it, my heart felt like it was being twisted into knots. Nora's skin was pale, her lips fading to a color that scared me more than anything had in years. The rhythm on the monitor stuttered, dropping, rising, dropping again. The doctor finally rushed in, moving like someone who had rehearsed this scene too many times. He barked orders, checked her pulse, examined the monitor. "What happened?" he demanded. "She experienced a sudden drop in blood pressure and oxygen saturation," the nurse said quickly. "It started just a few minutes ago." Ben took a half step forward, unable to control himself any longer. "Please help her," he begged. "Please. We're doing everything we can," the doctor answered without looking up. But even as he said it, I could feel something shifting in the air. Some line being crossed, some invisible point where the balance of survival began to tip dangerously. A soft alarm went off. The doctor stiffened. "Her heart rhythm is unstable," he said urgently. "Prepare to start compressions." I felt my stomach drop. My hands went cold. "No, no, please," I whispered. Before they began, the doctor said firmly, "I need both of you to step outside." I shook my head violently. "I'm not leaving her." "You can't be in the room if we start chest compressions," he insisted. "It's protocol." Ben grabbed my hand. His grip was so tight it almost hurt, but I didn't pull away. "We're not leaving her," he said, voice hoarse but determined. The doctor hesitated for only a moment, protocol warring with sympathy, then nodded sharply toward the corner. "Stay against the wall. And don't interfere." We didn't move. We pressed ourselves into the corner, barely able to breathe, barely able to exist in the same world where Nora's life was slipping out of reach. The doctor placed his hands on her chest. Then everything happened at once. The sound of compressions, the sharp commands, the rising panic inside me, Ben's ragged breathing beside me. And the terrible, terrible silence of Nora's body not responding. Charge the defibrillator, the doctor said. A nurse prepared the paddles, her hands steady despite the tension. Clear. The shock hit Nora's body, making it jolt violently. Ben cried out, half stepping forward before collapsing back against the wall, burying his face in his hands. I squeezed his shoulder, my own tears blurring my vision so badly I could barely see. Again, the doctor ordered. Clear. Another jolt. Her heartbeat flickered weakly on the monitor. And then slowly, oh God, painfully slowly, the line settled into a fragile rhythm again. Pulse is returning, the nurse said. It's weak, but it's there. I gasped so loudly it felt like my lungs were ripping open. Ben slumped against the wall, sobbing into his palms. My own tears fell freely as I whispered, Thank you. Thank you. But the relief was short-lived. The doctor turned to us, face still tense. She's stable for now, but barely. I'm moving her to the ICU for close monitoring. This episode. It's a sign that things are progressing faster than we expected. Ben wiped his face, trembling. But she's alive. She's still here. Yes, the doctor said softly. But this was a warning. I felt the air leave my lungs. A warning. A sign. A reminder that time was slipping away faster than any of us wanted to admit. As the nurses prepared Nora for transport, Ben stepped back, leaning heavily against the wall, his hands shaking uncontrollably. I can't lose her, Mom, he whispered, voice breaking. Not when I'm this close. Not when I finally found a chance. I turned to him slowly. Ben, I said gently, you need to tell me everything. What exactly is this treatment? Who are these researchers? What are they offering? He swallowed hard. I'll tell you. Promise. But Mom, there's something I haven't shown you yet. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. His hands were trembling so badly he nearly dropped it. There's a video, he said. A message from one of the researchers. She explained everything. I was going to show you tonight, after I signed the initial consent. He unlocked his phone, but just as he was about to press play, two men in dark uniforms walked into the hall. Not police but hospital security. They approached us firmly. Benjamin Harris? The taller one asked. Ben stiffened. Yes. We need to speak with you. My heart dropped. About what? I demanded. The security officer exchanged a tense look with his partner before saying, It concerns an incident in the parking lot involving your vehicle, and a potential violation involving restricted access. Ben's face drained of color. And suddenly everything inside me knew. This wasn't a coincidence. Whatever he was involved in, whatever he had been hiding, it was bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than I had imagined. Ben's entire body froze. His hands gripped my arm like a lifeline, and I could feel his panic seeping into me. The two security officers stood like statues, their expressions unreadable, their presence heavy and imposing. My mind raced 1,000 miles a minute trying to connect the dots. What parking lot? What restricted access? Why now? What incident? I demanded, my voice sharp, cutting through the tension. One of the officers, the taller one, spoke carefully, like every word weighed heavily on him. We have reason to believe that Mr. Harris's vehicle was involved in transporting unauthorized personnel into a restricted medical area. We need to speak with him immediately and review surveillance footage. Ben's face went pale. His lips trembled. It's not what it looks like, he stammered. It wasn't. Not what it looks like. I snapped, anger and fear surging through me. Ben, explain. Now. He swallowed hard, glancing at Nora's room where the nurses were finishing up her transfer to the ICU. The beeping machines, the faint hum of the ventilator, the soft movements of the staff. It all felt fragile, like the entire world could collapse in an instant. I didn't want anyone to know until we had it secured, he said finally, voice trembling. Those researchers, the experimental treatment, it's not fully legal. It's complicated. High risk. They're working outside the official channels to get approval. I had to transport them discreetly. That's what the security officers are referring to. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. My son, desperate to save his wife, had crossed lines we hadn't even discussed. Ben, you could have gone to prison. For what? To save her. He looked at me, eyes wild with desperation. Mom, do you think I care about me right now? She's dying. And this might be her only chance. I had to do it. The security officer stepped closer. Sir, this isn't a debate. We need to review the footage and take statements. This is serious. Ben's hand shook as he lifted his phone, still open to the video message from the researcher. He hesitated, then said, I'll show you proof. This video explains everything. You'll see I'm not reckless. I'm trying to save her life. He pressed play. The video flickered to life, showing a woman in a white lab coat, calm and precise. She spoke with authority, explaining the experimental treatment, the procedure, and the life-or-death urgency behind it. Her words were clear. The treatment was untested in mainstream hospitals, but it had remarkable results in rare cases. The officers watched silently. Even they looked impressed by the seriousness and dedication in the researcher's voice. She's not lying, Ben said urgently. This could save her life. But time is critical. If we get caught now, it might be delayed too long. I could see the weight of responsibility crushing him. His whole body trembled, not from fear of the officers, but from the stakes, the fact that Nora's life depended on these risky choices. One of the officers finally spoke. We understand the urgency. But rules are rules. You need to come with us, provide your statement and the footage. We will assess the situation and work with hospital administration. Ben's face twisted with desperation. You don't understand. She's in ICU. She's barely holding on. If this gets delayed, Sir, the officer said calmly, we are aware of her condition, but we cannot bend the rules. You will cooperate, or the consequences could be worse. I stepped forward, feeling my own voice rise in a way I hadn't expected. She is dying. I shouted. You have to understand. This is not a normal case. You can't just treat her like any other patient. Her life is literally hanging by a thread. The officers glanced at each other, then back at me. Their faces softened, but their stance didn't change. We understand your concern, ma'am, the taller officer said slowly. But we must follow procedure. It's for everyone's safety, including hers. We'll expedite everything, but cooperation is required. Ben's face crumpled. He glanced at me, eyes filled with panic, guilt, and desperation. Mom, I don't know what to do. I can't leave her. I can't. This might be the only chance we get. I felt my chest tighten. My mind raced. This was exactly the kind of situation that had haunted me. The cruel balance between saving the one you love and facing the consequences of bending the rules. Then, in a moment of clarity, I realized something. The officers were just people bound by procedure. But I had a mother's power. A mother's instinct to fight for the life of someone I loved, even if the law and rules stood in the way. I took a deep breath and faced the officers directly. Listen to me. She's dying. This treatment is her only hope. You can't delay it. I don't care what procedures you follow. You must let him finish what he started, or I swear you'll regret standing in the way of a life you can save. There was a tense pause. The air seemed to crackle. The taller officer looked at his partner, who nodded slightly. Then he looked at Ben, then back at me. All right, he said finally, voice cautious. We will allow this to proceed. But you must sign a waiver, and everything must be documented. No deviation from the protocol. You understand? Ben's shoulders sagged with relief. He looked at me, voice trembling. Mom, we can do this. We can save her. I can't fail her now. I nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Then do everything you have to. Don't waste a second. As they turned to prepare the paperwork, I caught a glimpse of Nora's pale face on the monitor. Her chest rose and fell slowly, but she was still alive. Still fighting. And for the first time in hours, I felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. But deep in my chest, a warning whispered. This was far from over. The treatment might work, the researchers might deliver, but the risks were enormous. One wrong move, one mistake, and everything could collapse. Ben looked at me, his eyes desperate. Mom, I can't lose her. Not now. Not ever. I nodded. Then don't. And in that moment we both understood. The fight had only just begun. The minutes crawled as the officers prepared the waiver and documented every detail. Ben's hands shook as he signed the papers, his eyes never leaving Nora's monitor. I could see the strain written on his face. Fear, guilt, desperation, all mixed together into something raw and human. When the paperwork was finally done, the officers gave a curt nod and left, their presence disappearing but their weight lingering in the room. Ben exhaled shakily, relief and tension clashing violently inside him. "We don't have much time," he whispered, almost to himself. "If we want this to work, it has to start now. The treatment, it's delicate, precise. There's no margin for error." I held his arm tightly. "Then we do it. Whatever it takes. I'm with you." He nodded, glancing at Nora. The lines of panic and exhaustion on his face softened slightly. For the first time since the crisis began, I saw determination replacing despair. He pulled up the video from the researchers again, watching the steps, the measurements, the warnings. I could see him memorizing every detail, every instruction, every gesture, every number mattered. One wrong move could cost her everything. "Mom, I need to do this perfectly," he said, his voice shaking. "She's all I have left. I can't lose her." "You won't," I said firmly. "I'll help however I can." The team of researchers, finally allowed into the hospital under emergency clearance, arrived shortly afterward. They were calm, professional, and focused, but I could see the gravity in their eyes. They had come to save a life, but even they knew the odds weren't entirely in our favor. "Let's get started immediately," the lead researcher said, motioning to a small tray of medical instruments and vials. "Timing is critical. Any delay could reduce the effectiveness." Ben moved quickly, setting up the equipment under the researcher's guidance. His hands still shook, but there was precision in his movements. Every motion mattered. Every second counted. I stood beside the bed, holding Nora's hand again, whispering words I hoped she could hear. "You're strong, my love. Fight for us. Fight for him. Fight for yourself." The treatment began. The researchers moved efficiently, carefully administering the first doses, monitoring Nora's vitals, and adjusting as necessary. The beeping of the monitors became my heartbeat. Every rise and fall, every flutter of her chest, felt monumental. For a while nothing seemed to change. The tension in the room grew unbearable. Ben's jaw was tight, sweat glistening on his forehead. He whispered prayers under his breath, small pleas that felt fragile but somehow powerful. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, Nora's breathing stabilized. Her chest rose more steadily. The monitor, which had been flickering dangerously, began to show a rhythm, fragile but alive. Ben's hands shook less. His lips quivered with relief. "Mom, she's responding," he whispered, barely daring to speak it aloud. I could feel tears stinging my eyes. I nodded, my own heart hammering. "She's strong," I said. "She's fighting. And we're not giving up." The researchers continued their work, carefully, methodically, monitoring every aspect, adjusting doses, checking vitals. Time stretched into an eternity, each second measured in breaths and heartbeats. Suddenly, the monitors beeped sharply. Nora's oxygen levels dropped slightly. Everyone froze. "Stay calm," the lead researcher said, her voice steady. "We can adjust. This is normal in this phase." Ben's hands clenched around mine. "No, not now. Not after everything," he muttered, his voice breaking. I pressed my forehead to his shoulder. "I'm here. She's here. We can do this." Minutes passed. Hours felt like minutes. Slowly, the treatment began to take effect. Her color returned. Her vitals stabilized. The dangerous dips in the monitor eased. Ben sank into the chair beside me, exhausted but overjoyed. She's going to make it," he whispered. "She's going to survive." I nodded, unable to speak. Words felt useless in the face of this miracle. But just as relief began to wash over us, my phone buzzed again. A text message. From an unknown number. I glanced at it. My blood ran cold. "You think you fixed it, but it's far from over. She's alive, but she's not safe. Watch your son. He's in more danger than he realizes." I dropped the phone. The room went silent except for the steady beep of Nora's monitor. Ben noticed my face. "Mom, what is it?" I shook my head slowly, fear creeping into my chest. We're not done yet. Someone knows about what you did. And they're coming. The air in the room shifted. The relief, the hope. It all felt fragile, hanging by a thread. Ben stood immediately, eyes wide. Coming? Who? Why? I didn't have the answers. Only the certainty that the battle to save Nora's life had just opened a new, even more dangerous front. And whoever was watching, they weren't going to wait. The room was heavy with silence after the men in suits had vanished, leaving only the faint hum of machines and the soft, rhythmic beeping of Nora's monitor. Ben slumped back in his chair, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. His eyes, though bloodshot and wide, carried a spark that hadn't been there before. A raw, fierce determination born from the edge of fear and desperation. I could feel it too, the adrenaline that had surged and now lingered in our veins like a warning that the calm was temporary. I stepped closer to the bed, brushing a loose strand of hair from Nora's pale face. Her breathing had steadied, but there was still a fragility about her that made my chest tighten. She looked like someone suspended between worlds, caught in the fragile line between life and death. I could only hope that the treatment had taken hold, that this fragile thread we were clinging to would hold long enough for her to fight back fully. Ben's hand found mine, gripping it tightly as he leaned closer to the bed. Mom! She's still with us, he whispered, voice trembling. She's really here. I can't believe it. You have to believe it, I said softly, pressing my other hand against his shoulder. Because if you don't, we won't survive the next wave. You have to stay focused. He nodded, swallowing hard, his jaw tight. His gaze never left Nora. I know. I can't screw this up. I don't even know where to start next. Those men, they're watching us. Someone knows everything we did, Mom. They know about the treatment, about the researchers. And they won't stop until they get what they want. I felt a chill run down my spine. Then we make sure they don't get it, I said firmly. Whatever it takes. We protect her. We protect each other. And we don't make mistakes. Ben exhaled shakily, trying to calm himself, trying to force order into the chaos swirling around us. We can't just hide forever, he muttered. We need a plan. We need a strategy. Because I won't risk her life again, not for anything, not for anyone. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle like a stone in my chest. We'll figure it out, I said. We'll figure it out together. But first she needs rest. The treatment is delicate. Any sudden stress, any interruption could undo everything. You have to let her stabilize. Ben nodded, glancing down at Nora with a mixture of awe and terror. He reached out, brushing her hair back again, his fingers trembling. Mom, I can't imagine losing her. Not after everything. I can't. You won't, I said. We won't let it happen. We stayed like that for a long time. Neither of us speaking, just holding hands and watching Nora. Every twitch of her fingers, every shallow rise and fall of her chest felt monumental. Every beep of the monitor was a heartbeat we were borrowing from fate. Hours passed. The hospital lights shifted subtly as night crept toward dawn, the quiet punctuated only by the faint sounds of other patients and distant footsteps in the halls. Ben never left her side, his hand resting gently on hers, his eyes flicking constantly between the monitor and her face. I sat beside him, silently offering support, watching, listening, waiting. At some point he whispered, almost to himself, Mom, what if they come back? What if they don't stop? I didn't answer immediately. The thought had crossed my mind countless times since the events began spiraling out of control. Whoever was watching them, whoever had threatened them, would not vanish. They would wait. They would strike again. And we had no idea when or how. They will come, I said finally, voice steady. But we'll be ready. We have to be. And right now, the only thing that matters is her. Everything else, we'll handle it when the time comes. Ben's lips pressed together, a quiet nod. He seemed to draw strength from my words, as if I had given him a lifeline to cling to. His hand stopped shaking slightly, though the tension remained, coiled like a spring ready to snap. The first hints of sunlight began to filter through the blinds, casting long slanted lines across the room. It was a reminder that time was passing, that the world continued outside these walls, oblivious to the storm we were enduring inside. I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion myself, the adrenaline beginning to ebb, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary fatigue. But there was no time to rest, not yet. Not when Nora's life hung in such precarious balance. Ben stood abruptly, pacing slowly beside the bed. We need to secure the research, Mom. We can't let anyone get their hands on it. If they know the treatment exists, if they track the researchers, it could all be over. She could die, and I won't forgive myself. I followed him, trying to match his urgency. Then we do what we have to. But we do it smartly. No rash moves. We can't afford another mistake. He stopped and looked down at me, his eyes burning with a mixture of fear and determination. I would die for her. I'd face anything, anyone, anywhere. I can't lose her. Not after everything we've been through. I pressed a hand to his cheek, feeling the tension, the raw emotion. You won't. Promise you. We'll get through this. Together. The machines continued to hum around us, the quiet beeps of her monitor a fragile melody of hope. And though the threat outside loomed, though danger lingered like a shadow waiting to strike, there was a fragile sense of control, of purpose. We had fought the first wave, survived the night, and now the next battle was approaching. The phone buzzed again. A new message. My heart skipped. We both froze. No name. No number. Just words. You've survived the first night. But the storm isn't over. Be ready. She is more valuable than you know, and everyone wants a piece of her fate. Ben's jaw tightened, his hands trembling again as he read the message aloud. Mom, they're not bluffing. They won't stop. They're watching everything we do. I nodded grimly. Then we need to be smarter. Faster. And we need to protect her at all costs. We can't let them win. Not now. Not ever. He sank back into the chair, staring at Nora with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. I can't fail her, he whispered. You won't, I said, voice steady. We're not done yet. And we won't let anything take her from us. The day stretched ahead, quiet but tense, filled with uncertainty. And outside the room, beyond the walls, the world waited. The storm was coming. And when it hit, we had to be ready. Every second, every breath, every heartbeat mattered now. We had survived the night, but survival was only the beginning. The morning sun poured through the blinds, casting long streaks of light across the hospital room. The quiet was different now. Not the fragile, tense silence of before, but a quiet filled with cautious hope. Nora's chest rose and fell steadily, her vitals stable for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Ben sat beside her, still holding her hand, his face etched with exhaustion but also a new sense of purpose. I watched him, my heart aching with pride and relief, realizing how far he had come from the son who once seemed lost in his own recklessness. For weeks we had been on the edge of despair, each day a precarious balancing act between hope and fear. I remembered the first time I saw him with those girls, that had thrown me into a storm of rage and betrayal. I had accused him of selfishness, of negligence, of failing the one person who mattered most. But now I understood. Every reckless moment, every desperate action, had been a leap toward saving Nora. The anger I had carried melted away, replaced with awe at the lengths a person could go to fight for love, for family, for life itself. Ben's eyes met mine, weary yet unyielding. Mom, we did it. We kept her alive. There was gratitude in his voice, but also an understanding of the war we had just endured. I squeezed his hand. We did more than keep her alive. We gave her a chance to fight back. And that's just the beginning. The truth was clear. Survival alone wasn't enough. We had crossed boundaries, risked legal repercussions, faced shadowy threats, and confronted the frightening reality that some people valued power over life itself. Yet in the eye of the storm we discovered resilience we never knew we had. The real victory wasn't just that Nora was alive. It was that we had faced impossible odds, stared into the abyss and refused to blink. As I looked at Nora lying so peacefully, a small smile flickered on her lips even in unconsciousness. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it spoke volumes. Life was returning to her. The treatment, risky as it had been, was working. And the knowledge that our fight had made this possible settled into my bones, a warmth that pushed back against the cold fear that had haunted us. Ben exhaled, the tension in his shoulders loosening slightly. I can't believe how close we came to losing her, he said softly. I don't know what I would have done. His voice broke, not with weakness, but with the enormity of emotion that only someone who has faced true desperation can understand. I thought I was strong, but I've never felt anything like this. I've never been tested like this before. I reached out, brushing a hand over his cheek. Strength isn't about never falling, Ben. It's about standing up over and over when the world tries to break you. And you've done that. Every step of the way. The hours passed, filled with cautious monitoring and quiet reflection. The shadow of those who had threatened us still lingered. A reminder that the fight was far from over. But there was something different now. A sense of clarity, a fierce determination that had been forged in fire. We had survived the immediate storm, and that survival had given us more than hope. It had given us strategy, purpose, and an unshakable bond. When Nora finally stirred, her eyes fluttering open, the relief was overwhelming. She focused on us, her gaze soft and uncertain at first, but quickly warming with recognition. "Mom." "Ben." Her voice was weak, but the love in it made the room feel electric, as though the very air had been charged by life itself. Ben leaned closer, his hands trembling as he held hers. "Nora, you're awake. You're safe. We've got you." His voice was a mixture of awe, love, and fear. The raw, unfiltered emotions of someone who had faced losing everything. Tears welled in my eyes as I stepped forward, brushing my fingers against her hair. "You fought so hard. You're still here. And we're going to make sure you stay." The words felt small compared to the enormity of what we had just endured. Yet somehow they carried weight, strength, and promise. As the day progressed, we began to breathe more freely, each moment of stability a small victory. The battle had been long and terrifying, but the result was undeniable. Nora's survival was a testament to love, courage, and relentless determination. And it wasn't just about her life. It was about the choices we made, the risks we took, and the unwavering refusal to surrender to despair. Ben and I shared a quiet moment alone by her bedside. "I was so angry at you," I admitted, voice low. "But I see now everything you did, every risky, impossible choice, it was love. Pure, desperate love." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I didn't want to make you proud. I didn't want to save myself. I had to save her. And I was terrified I'd fail." "You didn't fail," I said softly, pressing my hand over his. "Not when it mattered most. You've grown into someone I never imagined. Someone brave, someone fierce, someone capable of facing the impossible without turning away." The magnitude of what we had endured began to sink in. Every heartbeat we had borrowed from fate, every sleepless hour, every terrifying confrontation, had led to this moment. A fragile, beautiful chance at life renewed. And in that moment I understood something profoundly simple. The human spirit, fueled by love and determination, was capable of miracles. Outside, the hospital was waking up, unaware of the quiet battles being won behind closed doors. But inside that room, the air was electric with triumph, hope, and the unbreakable bond of family. We had faced betrayal, fear, and unimaginable risk. We had stared into the abyss of despair and emerged not only alive but stronger, united, and resolute. Ben looked at me, eyes shining with gratitude and relief. "Mom, we've been through hell. But we survived. And she's alive." I nodded, feeling an unshakable resolve settle over me. "Yes. And we will protect her. We will guard this chance with everything we have. The world may try to take it from us, but we will not allow it." As the sunlight brightened, filling the room with warmth, I realized that this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. A chance to rebuild, to heal, and to face whatever dangers the future might hold with courage and unwavering love. The fear that had consumed us had been replaced by strength, the despair replaced by hope, and the uncertainty replaced by determination. Nora's fingers twitched in ours, a subtle but powerful reminder that life could be fragile and fleeting, but also resilient beyond measure. Every breath she took was a testament to the lengths we would go for the ones we loved, and to the extraordinary power of perseverance, courage, and family. And in that quiet, powerful moment, I understood with perfect clarity. No obstacle, no threat, no darkness in the world could ever overshadow the force of love that drives us to fight, to risk, and to survive. We had faced the unimaginable, battled forces beyond comprehension, and emerged victorious. Not just for life, but for the enduring bond of those who refused to surrender. Nora was awake, alive, and fighting. and we were ready for whatever came next.